Hey there, this is Raquel Dancho, Member of Parliament for Kildonan St. Paul and Shadow Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, coming to you today from Winnipeg for my weekly roundup. Another issue I want to talk to you about, you may have heard a bit of it in the news, it's about Hong Kong and what's happening there with pro-democracy activists. So Hong Kong is under this agreement with China since 1997. It was a British colony, and in 1997 the Brits handed it over to China under a one country, two systems rule. So essentially it was to allow Hong Kong to be part of China, but to also maintain its democratic systems, its economic systems, and really be separate but together. And this agreement was supposed to be in place for 50 years. Here we are just about 23, 24 years later. And China apparently has had enough of that and is cracking down on independence movements in Hong Kong, on pro-democratic activists. It's actually really frightening. And this past June, they implemented the National Security Law. That's China implemented this onto Hong Kong. And that really gives China the power and the Hong Kong government the power to basically arrest anyone who's speaking out against China, who's talking about independence for Hong Kong, talking about democratic reforms, whatever it might be. So, and just so if people aren't aware, Hong Kong is an incredibly wealthy, well-developed nation. It has the most skyscrapers of any city in the world. It has the second most billionaires in their city of any city in the world. So very wealthy, well-educated, well-developed place. And Hong Kong also has about 7.5 million residents, and 300,000 of them are actually Canadians that live there. And there are more Hong Kongers that are permanent residents of Canada that also live in Hong Kong. So a lot of Canadians are at stake. Their freedoms are at stake in Hong Kong of what China's been doing. And you've heard for months or years what China's been doing to Canada. They put it on economic sanctions on our trade. So we've seen this with canola, with pork, a number of other agriculture products that we produce and ship to Canada. They've hurt our economy in that regard. We know that the two Michaels remain in detention unlawfully in China for over 700 days. And recently in the Globe and Mail, they reported, this is really astounding, actually. It harkened back for me to when I was learning about the Cold War in my international relations classes. They have something called, the Chinese government has something called Operation Fox Hunt, which seems to be operating in Canada as well, where they sort of send diplomats to come and bully Chinese Canadians that may be sort of independent-minded or came to Canada for more democratic freedoms and maybe aren't speaking highly of China or what have you. So they're sort of sending diplomats to come meet with Canadian government officials, and in between those meetings, they're going and intimidating Chinese Canadians in their own homes. And they're going in so far as to call Chinese Canadian family members and say, you better call your misbehaving Chinese Canadian relative and tell them that we're going to punish them if they don't be quiet about China. So this is serious stuff that is happening on Canadian soil. It is terrifying. And China, no qualms about it, they're cracking down and they want their supremacy across the world, and particularly on Hong Kong and other areas of that Asia-Pacific region that are wanting independence from the Chinese communist regime. So serious stuff going on. And actually just the other day, they, under sort of, it seems the Chinese orders, they expelled 4 democratically elected officials from the Hong Kong government. So that's as if a foreign government was telling us that 4 members of parliament that were too pro-democracy, too independent-minded, mind you, we have dozens of Bloc Québécois MPs who are independent-minded, that as if we expelled 4 of them. Said, nope, you're not welcome here. This is not freedom of speech. You can't have the democratic right to speak. You're out. That just happened this week. They expelled 4 democratically elected officials from their government. Unbelievable, the crackdown that's coming on civil rights in Hong Kong. There's been protests for months. So anyway, there are so many Canadians there that Canada needs a plan of how they're going to deal with this if it's going to get worse than these Canadians and other Hong Kongers want to flee an oppressive Chinese communist regime. So what the government just announced, and they sort of sold this as like their solution for all the Hong Kong Canadians there, and others, they're going to sort of expedite these sort of special work permits and education permits. And if you're on Canadian soil, they're going to help expedite your permanent residency. So basically taking processes that are more or less in place already and just promising to make them quicker and more efficient. Now, you can imagine what my opinion is, or my confidence is on the level of this Liberal government being any more efficient or competent on immigration streams, since obviously they've done a very poor job of that to date. So we had incredible skepticism of this announcement. What we wanted to see was a clear well thought out plan announced for political activists that are fleeing persecution in Hong Kong, that are looking to claim asylum on Canadian soil. We wanted to see some confidence from this Liberal government that they know the situation, what is happening there, and they recognize that Canadians and other Hong Kongers are at risk. Their civil rights are at risk. Their lives are at risk, frankly. And we wanted to see a plan, a real plan, on how we're going to help those pro-democratic activists. And there was nothing announced today. Frankly, it seems the Liberal government is very afraid to speak out against China, and perhaps with reason. But still, we need to stand up for what is right, and we wanted a stronger response. This was yesterday, and disappointingly, there's really nothing there for the pro-democratic activists. So we're going to keep pushing on that. So stay tuned. This certainly impacts Canada, as there are 300,000 Canadians in Hong Kong. So keep them in your thoughts. Next thing I want to talk to you about, this is an interesting thing. You've heard me advocating for small businesses for months, really since the economic shutdowns came. And the government brought forward something called the CECRA, which was basically a commercial rent assist program to assist small businesses with subsidizing some of their rent. But you'll remember me talking about this and asking questions about this earlier in the summer. The pickup was basically, it was maybe a third of what they thought it would be. There were requirements that the landlord basically have to check off that they were going to do this and provide this subsidy. That meant they had to take a 25% cut to their rent, that was the landlord's. They had to do all the paperwork, and then the tenant would be subsidized 50% of the rent, but have to pay another 25%. So again, it was essentially very burdensome, and there was very little pickup, and a lot of landlords were saying, no, I'm not taking a pay cut, and I don't want to do all this red tape work. I don't want to be involved with that. So there was very little pickup. And what's also interesting is the Liberal government decided that this program, which was worth billions of dollars, would be administered by the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, CMHC, which, as many of you know who are homeowners, is the Crown Corporation in Canada that provides mortgage insurance. Nothing to do with rent whatsoever. They said, nope, this is the best Crown Corporation to administer this, not CRA, CMHC. So they did that. What happened is CMHC, turns out, didn't have the capacity, so they had to contract it out to another company, and this is where it gets interesting. That company, the vice president of that company, is the husband of the longtime chief of staff to Justin Trudeau. Interesting how that seems to keep happening with all these Liberal subsidy programs. But I digress. So finally, after much pressure from the Conservatives and business groups and others, the Liberal government introduced a new CECRA program where they were going to provide a better subsidy directly to the tenant. Hallelujah for tenants. We've been calling on this for months. So it comes before Parliament, it gets debated, also parties are going to support it, sort of passes, it's in the Senate right now, and sort of in the process, after it was voted in, or voted to go to the Senate, what happened is Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, now she's been finance minister for about 2 months, she realized there was an error in the bill, that tenants had to pay the rent first in order to get the subsidy. So remember, a lot of these businesses, their revenue is down like 70%, 80%, 90%. Like you can just look around and see all the businesses that are going out of business in North Kildonan and in other areas of Kildonan, St. Paul, and Winnipeg. So imagine they have to pay their rent, which they have no revenue to pay, and then hopefully they'll get the subsidy. Ridiculous. So she tried to amend it sort of last minute, completely out of order. She was ruled out of order by the speaker. It was like, too late. So now it's in the Senate. Hopefully they can help fix the problem, send it back to the House of Commons so we can get this fixed. But really, my point is they had 6 weeks, of prorogation to figure out their plan. They knew about this problem for 6 months, and they brought forward a bill and passed it, and then realized the bill was crap. Oh, like it's just so frustrating to see this level of incompetence this far into the pandemic. But suffice this to say, we're going to continue holding them account on behalf of all the businesses and all the people in my riding and across Canada that are employed by small businesses. 73% of Manitobans employed in the private sector are employed by small businesses. Like, we need to get this right or people's jobs are at risk. And Christmas is coming, like not the right time to really be screwing up one of these programs if ever there was a right time. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week.